So here we are moving back into the Gospel of Mark. And in this Gospel, Mark captures the authority of Jesus, as we mentioned the last time. We went through the first part of chapter 1, um, and we are now going to finish chapter 1, and we're going to start in verse 29 if you're following along. And so this is chapter 1, part 2. And so it says, as soon as Jesus and his companions had left the synagogue, they went with James and John to the home of Simon and Andrew. Remember the first four um, disciples that are now known, of course, as apostles. They were, of course, first Simon and his brother Andrew, and then John and James. So those are the first four. And now it says that James and John went with Simon and Andrew to their home. And Simon's mother in law was sick in bed with a fever. And they promptly told Jesus about her. Hey, you know what? My mother-in-law is really sick. I can imagine the dialogue that went on. So Jesus went to her. He took her by the hand and he helped her up. And the fever left her. And she began to serve them. And that evening, after the sun set, people brought to Jesus all who were sick and demon possessed. And the whole town, the town where Simon lived, the whole town gathered at the door. And he healed many who were ill with various diseases, and he drove out many demons. But he would not allow the demons to speak because they knew who he was. Early in the morning, while it was still dark, this was a regular thing that Jesus did, Jesus got up and he slipped out to a solitary place to pray so that he could spend time with the Father. Well, Simon and his companions, still from their house, they went to look for him. And when they found him, they said, "Hey, Jesus, everyone's looking for you." But Jesus answered, "Let us go on to the neighboring towns, not just stay here in your town, but let's go to the neighboring towns so I can preach there as well. For that is why I've come." So he went all throughout Galilee, preaching in their synagogues and driving out demons. Well, then a leper came to Jesus, begging on his knees, "If you are willing, you can make me clean." So just imagine this the poor beggar who humbly came to Jesus and asked him, didn't expect, didn't say, "Hey, heal me," said, "If you are willing, I know that you can make me clean." This in itself captures the faith of this beggar. But he asked humbly and in complete faith, knowing that Jesus could make him clean if it was his will. Moved with compassion, Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man and said, "I am willing, be clean." And immediately the leprosy left him and the man was cleansed. You know, leprosy back then, we all know, was one of the worst diseases that a human could suffer. And the fact that Jesus touched him was a miracle in itself. And the fact that Jesus, of course, didn't, not only did he not fear, but he never did get leprosy from touching many lepers, but he healed him because of the man's faith. That's what healed this man, was the power of God based on faith. Jesus promptly sent him away, and he gave him a stern warning. And this, many people talk about, why would Jesus do that? Warn him. He said, "See to it that you don't tell anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest, and present the offering that Moses had prescribed for your cleansing, and do this as a testimony to them." And You know, a lot of people speculate, well, Jesus was just being humble. But Jesus didn't advertise himself the way most people, like almost every human would, wanting to, in a very humble way, be proud and yet not want to illustrate it. Jesus didn't have that in his heart at all. I don't believe that. He gave him a stern warning because he didn't want him to go tell people, because he wanted to have freedom to move all around the region without having to step over all of these people who are just like they are in the world today, the Jerry Springer mindset. Let's watch. When somebody drives down a highway and sees an accident, what do? All the traffic slows down so they can look. And what do they see? An accident. Oh, but everybody wants to stop and look. Why? So that later they can say, oh, I saw that accident, or they want to be able to gain an account so that they can share with others. Well, this is what happened here. Jesus didn't want that to happen. He wanted this guy to go and just simply go present himself to the priest and do the offering that Moses prescribed, because he was cleansed of leprosy, and do it as a testimony to those who were at the synagogue. But the man, he went out and openly began to proclaim and spread the news. Well, if we were healed of leprosy and we were overwhelmed, and the person who healed us said, don't go tell anyone, we might have had the intention in our heart not want to, until people started seeing us cleansed, and we would have wanted to share with them and answer their questions of how did this happen? The exuberance, the joy, the freedom that this poor beggar felt who had leprosy. And he went out and proclaimed it and spread the news everywhere. And so consequently, guess what happened? Jesus could no longer enter a town in plain view. So he stayed outside in a solitary place. He no longer could go where the crowds were, or he would never have any solitude with the Father. And we know this is what he cherished. However, he knew he came to preach to those towns, so he was going to them, but wouldn't stay there. And this began his opportunity to sit around the fire outside of the towns with his disciples and to share koinonia with them, to answer their questions and to teach them, and to share the things that happened in the crowds as time went on. This was the beginning of that. So he stayed outside in solitary places, but yet it didn't matter. People came to him in every quarter. And each day he had to deal with the crowds. Not that he didn't want to. It wasn't why he told that beggar in a stern way, don't go tell anyone. But now he foreknew that he would lose the freedom to move about without being hooked by the crowds. And so that's the end of chapter 1 of Mark's account of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Amen.